Welcome to the House of Truth. Today, today we're continuing on from where our last couple were. We we talked about on Shavuot or Pentecost about the spirit of wisdom and how we cannot get the power of wisdom that comes from putting wisdom into action without God's spirit, and we cannot live wisely without His spirit. And then last time we talked about the God of wisdom. Our God is the God of wisdom, not not Athena or or something, some god of the pagans, but the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the God of wisdom. And today we're going to talk about wisdom from God. You know, how how's He give it to us? How's all this work, and how does it benefit us, and what is our part in getting wisdom from God? And we're going to begin here. We're going to begin here with looking at our kind of our hero in our study of wisdom, Melech Shalomo, King Solomon, about how it worked in his life to begin with. In First Kings 3, chapter First Kings 3, verse 8 through 12, we read the following. Sorry about that. Your servant is in the midst of your people, which you have chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered or counted for multitude. Therefore, give your servant understanding heart to judge your people, and may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this people, this your people, this yours, so great a people? And the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon asked this thing. And God said unto him, because you have asked this thing, and have not asked for your life, for yourself long life, neither asked riches for yourself, nor asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to your words. Lo, I have given you a wise understanding heart, so that there was none like you before you, near after you shall any arise like unto you. So there's several I was saying things to notice this. Notice that Solomon asked for wisdom. As I saw before, if anyone lacks wisdom, if even it's a believer, is lacks wisdom to ask God, who will give it to you without upbraiding you, without, as to say, without making you, telling you what a moron you are, or whatever, you stupid person, you better, anything like that. He'll just tell you what to do if you ask him. And God gave him this wisdom, but why? See, Solomon, it was taught. So God appeared to Solomon in a dream, and he told Solomon, he asked Solomon, he could give him anything he wanted. And the Lord's pleased because notice, Solomon didn't ask for anything for himself. His concern was other people. He wanted the wisdom so he could discern between good and bad, so he could judge. So because he was a king, he's becoming king. His father David had just died, and he's just 16 years old at the time, and he wanted to make wise decisions for the people's sake. And this is very important. This is why God pleased him and why God gave him the wisdom. And he also gave him riches as well, and honor, and some other things, but that Solomon did not ask for. So a key here is we need to be seeking wisdom, not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of others, like King Solomon did. And in 1 Kings 4, 39 through 40, verses 29 through 34, we read the following. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much, large as the heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country, and all the wisdom of Egypt. He is wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Calcho, and Darda, the sons of Mahal. And his fame was was in all nations round about. And he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar trees in Lebanon, even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. He spoke of beasts and of fowl and of the creeping things and of fishes. And there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon, from all kings of the earth that which had heard of his wisdom. So this is another thing here. Notice when God gives you wisdom, word gets out. Okay, first of all, word gets out. But notice that the East Country, Timon among the Arabs, was noted for its in what's Arabia today, was a place where they were gathered wisdom, and they wrote it down. Of course, over in Babylon to the east, Persia, Assyria, and especially, but notice how Egypt, especially by itself, is singled out, because the Egyptians have been collecting this wisdom for a long time and writing it down, and even years later, the Library of Alexandria was in Egypt, which is and so these places were known, but that wisdom they collected was not based on the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's some wisdom people can get in general from experience. Well, that was a dumb idea. I'll write that down. Just why that didn't work out, and this is what we should do instead. And keep track of that kind of thing. But this is not just human. That's human wisdom. But his wisdom excelled human wisdom. It was beyond human wisdom. And Ethan and Heman are both talked about, especially with King David. These are older than him, his fathers, and indeed they were involved with the music and writing some of the Psalms. But he was wiser than the wisest people. Those are the wisest people in Israel at the time that's listed here. These are the people his father had went to for advice, but now he's wiser than them. And it shows up in Proverbs, which we're looking at. Notice there's 3,000, and we've got less than that. And his songs, he wrote a bunch of songs as well. And often wisdom is embedded in songs. And and one reason to people do that is because it makes these people just remember it, but it also gets their attention. But Solomon's wisdom was famous because, again, when wisdom's from God, it excels human wisdom, and people take notice. So we need this wisdom from God. We need this wisdom. This wisdom from God is noticeable. Now in 1 Kings 10, 6-7, we read this. And she said to the king, it is a true report that I heard in my own land of your acts and of your wisdom. I believed not the words till I came, my eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceeds the fame of which I heard. So now this is the Queen of Sheba talking about, came from the ends of the earth, and a little bit of ambiguity there in that Sheba, when you look in Genesis 10 with the nations that are listed, there's two called Sheba, and one came from Cush, which actually means black, okay? Cush, which was sub-Saharan Africa, mainly where his descendants went to, and then part of the Middle East and Arabia, parts of Arabia and stuff also, and also in Iraq. In the day, there's still people who've been there thousands of years that have black skin in Iraq at the southern part, but primarily in Africa. And there's another one that came from Shem, and settled in the Middle East, somewhere. And Yemen in ancient times is known as Sheba, but there's also a Sheba, but the Sheba in Africa would better fit Yeshua's description of the ends of the earth, the queen of the south. If you're going south from Israel, or you're going south from Jerusalem, you kind of get to a lot, and you got a fork in the road. If you keep going straight south, you're in the Red Sea, right? So if you're going by land, you can go down to Yemen, which is about a month, it's about a month journey back in the day, maybe 2 months to go from Yemen up to Jerusalem. But if you went to the ends of the south going the other route, you're talking South Africa today. You're literally at the ends of the earth. There's nowhere further south you can go, as far as walking goes. And that, of course, that would be a journey of you know, maybe 2 years time. So it really fits better. But regardless of either way of who this is, the thing is, remember that all the kings had heard of it. Well, she had heard of this wherever she was, and she didn't believe it. She said, "Nah, that's got to be an exaggeration." But when she got there, she said half it wasn't told her. It was wiser than it was wiser than his reputation did. And this is what happens when you get wisdom. When you get wisdom from God, a lot of people will know you're wise. The people, when they get to know you, they'll find you're wiser than what they heard. Okay, this, and we need this wisdom from God in our lives, because remember, ultimate goal of wisdom is to win souls. And we'll talk about that some more in our next lesson, which will probably be our final lesson on wisdom. Now, in Proverbs 49, 1-5, we read the following. Hear this, all you people. Give ear, you inhabitants of the world, both low and rich, low and high, rich and poor, together. My mouth shall speak of wisdom, the meditation of my heart shall be of understanding. I shall incline my ear to a parable. I will open my dark saying upon the harp. Wherefore should I fear in the days of evil, when the iniquity of my heels shall compass me about? Well, first I'm going to start at that last statement there. The iniquity of the heels here is a reference to Messiah. Remember, the serpent was going to bite him in the heel in the Garden of Eden, and it's been about 10 years or more now, maybe 15 years, somewhere in that area. They found an actual, some of the art says that crucifixion never happened, blah, blah, blah. And they found a part of a cross with a human foot bone, with a human nailed onto it, and it was nailed to the heel into the cross. And it turns out that was actually more common, not to have your feet crossed like you've seen in pictures and whatever, one nail going through both of them, but the feet on both sides of the pole with a nail going through each heel. So the iniquity of the heels here is those nails going through his cross for our iniquities. Again, there's a foreshadowing of Messiah here, but he's not gonna fear in that day of evil, in those days of evil. Why? Because he has wisdom from God, and so did the psalmist here, and so should we. And because there's wisdom from God, notice the mouth of Messiah spoke of wisdom, and his heart was of understanding. Inclined to a parable. Remember, everything he spoke was in parables to people. A lot of times it said there were cases where everything spoke, like for that day or whatever, was in parables, and it was so that those who, we'll talk about why, but that was a dark saying. It doesn't mean dark in that some sort of doom and gloom. Dark in the sense it's hidden from people. It's not readily apparent what it means, just like a parable. Remember, even the disciples had to say, hey, could you explain that to us? We don't get it. Okay, so it was hidden, and Messiah spoke to people in parables all the time, and this is part of why here in Psalms 49, 1-5. But we're going to look at, but there's a little bit more of what, I mean, to fulfill that, sure, but why parables? We're going to look at this and we'll see. In Proverbs 1, verse 5 through 9, we read this: a wise man will hear and increase in learning. A man of understanding shall attain to wise counsels. To understand a proverb, the interpretation of the wise in their dark sayings. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of your father, forsake not the law of your mother. They should be an ornament of grace upon your head and chains about your neck. Okay, so notice, if you're going to understand, these a proverb and these dark sayings, you have to listen to other people that are wise. You have to seek wisdom. And where's this wisdom and knowledge come from? So you can understand Proverbs, and you can understand these dark sayings, these parables. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So the reason why giving it in parables is that in dark sayings is so people is because they keep the foolish from understanding it, because they don't want to go get wisdom, not even for their parents. And listen, if you part of God's plan to get the part his wisdom to you is often through your parents, particularly if you have godly parents. And you need to listen to the instructions of your father, and not forsake the law of your mother. When you get out, when you're no longer living in their house, your mother may have trained you to do something, may have told you to do something, may not, it may be particularly wise to do it. And it may not, medical science may bear it out later, or whatever, right? Don't be just forsaking the law of your mother. We would say lightly. Obviously, it contradicts God's law or something. Because you may often we have to do things and later we understand them. And notice ornament of grace in your head and chains about your neck. And think about, this is not chains like some iron collar on a slave. Think of more like gold chains, like a wrap, like some of these rappers used to have or whatever, right? And what's the point of chain? What's the point of chains or necklaces and ornament an ornament on someone's head? To get people to look at your face, to look at your head, right? Because your head's people talk about head. Feel about the head versus the hand, or whatever, manual labor with your hands versus intellectual labor with your head. So to bring attention to this, to show that that this wisdom is upon you, and just like you're actually wearing something, people will be able to see that. But it begins with the fear of the Lord, and the parable cannot be understood, and for that reason, because fools don't want to do the things necessary to understand the parables, the wisdom's given that way, so that the wise will, so the righteous and the righteous and the wise will get it, and the foolish will just will be off. So hearing they will hear, having ears they will not hear, having eyes they will not see. And in Daniel 22 verses 20 through 22, we read the following. And Daniel explains a little bit more. Daniel answers, blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. He changed the times and the seasons. He removes kings and set up kings. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness. In the light dwells with him. Okay, so Daniel recognizes God's the source of wisdom, and because and his might, and as we talked about last time, being the God of wisdom, he knows how to put anyone. He can set up kings and take them down. He can bring about a change instantly. I mean, in just instantly, short time. Like let's say with an economy, it can be roaring, and then suddenly it goes crashing down. Or it can be down, and it be down like in the Great Depression, and suddenly start, all reverse, and in a short amount of time go up. kind of like happened, kind of like happened when Trump took office. At the end of the day, presidents like to take credit, or people like to blame the presidents, and they do have some. They do whether they use wisdom or not have some say. But at the end of the day, God's the one that changed the times in the season, and Daniel recognized this. And you got to get this wisdom from God. He gives wisdom to the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. These deep sayings, these dark secrets, he's the one. He knows. He knows what they mean, and he's the revealer of them. So the purpose of the parables, these things being given in dark secrets, is so we'll seek God, the God of wisdom, so we can get wisdom from God. And God's wisdom, and because God has wisdom, his wisdom's beyond just the things we just talked about, but it goes even further. Remember, Solomon had all that wisdom about natural things, birds and stuff. And in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 19 to 20, we see how he got that. The Lord by wisdom found the earth, as everybody's understanding, has established the heavens. By his knowledge, the depths are broken up, the clouds drop down the dew. Now, so the Lord, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahweh, God, however you like, as you please, by him, or just the Lord, he understands every natural thing. These depths is talking about being broken up. Remember, just a couple of years ago, in the last 2 or 3 years, scientists found, and maybe even last year, they discovered that there's an ocean under the ocean that has more water under the bottom of the ocean. Go down further, there's more water under that than what's on the ocean. And this, and critics of the Bible have said, well, Noah, where'd all that water go? It couldn't, the oceans couldn't contain enough water to cover it. Well, of course they couldn't, because if the oceans contain enough water, we'd be all underwater right now. But the Bible plainly said it never rained on the earth, and the water that caused the rain come up out of the deep. So these depths are not talking about the ocean, but the water. It's even deeper in the earth than that. Okay, and it says when it was over, it drained back into it. And the clouds dropped down the dew. There's like, well, they drop down rain. Fog is a cloud on the ground surface. And it was been around. Fog knows it produces dew all over the ground. The clouds drop down and then the dew forms. Okay, so God understands all natural things, and that's where Solomon was able to explain all these natural things, because God had imparted this wisdom to him concerning natural things. But that's not all. But God's not limited just to those natural things, the things of the earth. We're going to read about here in Proverbs 20, verse 24 through 25. Man's goings are of the Lord. How can a man understand his own way? It is a snare to a man to devour that which is holy, and after vows to make inquiry. And so what's it? The snare to the man devours that which is holy. Well, sacrifices like the one at Sukkot or Tabernacles, the various other ones. The person making the sacrifice often was supposed to eat part of it, eat it in the temple, as well as the priest and whatever. In certain cases, okay. So the problem was, it's not devouring the holy, but the problem is devouring the holy, but not doing things the right way, and particularly after vows to make an inquiry. After you make a vow, and we talked about this recently, looking for a loophole to get out of your vow, because about making an inquiry. Maybe you made a vow you shouldn't have, and then you're trying to find a way out of the vow. but better not to make a vow than to make it not pay it, Solomon said. So, and a man may not understand his own ways, and most of us have, most people have probably done this. If they haven't, you probably know somebody. If you haven't done this, you probably know somebody who does, who did something, and they may not. They may be like, I don't know why I did that. It may have been wise, and they were like, I don't know where, how I knew to do that, but I did, or it may have been foolish, huh? Like, how did I get myself in this stupid mess? I have no idea why I did that, huh? A man cannot understand his own way, but our God, the God of wisdom, also understands what motivates people, what causes people to go where they're going, to do the things they do. That's and again, that goes back to these thing about the kings raising them up and bringing them down. He knows how to get them to do what he wants because he understands man's going. In that wisdom he has, we can get about people like Solomon did. Wisdom from God includes that. And in Proverbs 25, 1 through 3, verses 1 through 3, read the following. There are also Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied out. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings to search out the matter. The heaven for height and the earth for depth, and the heart of the king is unsearchable. So, it's the glory of God. So, it's God's glory to conceal these things. It's the glory of kings to search it out. It's their glory to find out the matter, to go there and have it revealed. And how they search this out, that thing God concealed, we saw Daniel say, and Solomon, you've got to get that wisdom from God. So you search it out by seeking God. And yes, you may do some other kind of investigation, but often you cannot get it without the help of God. And because of this, and the anointing of God is also upon kings. Remember, he knows the goings of a way in a man himself knows. And just like no one searched out we've never gone to the outer edge of outer space, the heavens for height. It just goes on and on and on. We've never gone to the center of the earth, like Journey to the Center of the Earth, that fictional movie or story or book by Jules Verne, right? We've never, we're not able to search those things out. And so also is a king's heart unsearchable. Because the anointing of God, because God knows how to manipulate this. And if rulers are there legitimately, there's a certain amount of anointing on them. Even if they weren't anointed with oil like David, which is a physical representation of a spiritual reality. But it makes their hearts unsearchable. The other people cannot know what they're going to do or why they're going to do it. And the truth is, even the king himself may not know. But he may not even recognize God. And there's examples of this in the Bible of kings who were not, at least at the time when they started out, they certainly weren't worshiping God. But God would move on their heart, and God would give them wisdom and move and cause them to do something like send the Jews back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. When Cyrus come to believe in God, I don't know. Ahasuerus, right? Eventually, because no one could tell what that guy was going to do. It did not work out well for Haman. The king's heart was unsearchable. And we need wisdom from God, because wisdom from God comes there. They don't even understand why they do it themselves, but God gave them that wisdom. And God's wisdom doesn't end there. Because he is literally in control of all kinds of everything. except for man's free will, which he gave man. But here's an example. Proverbs 16, and even that he knows, he understands our goings, right? In Proverbs 16, verse 33, read this: the law is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing there is of the Lord. There's an entire branch of mathematics that formed, I don't know, it may have gotten older, but I first learned about 15 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. That's devoted to the ideal that there is no such thing as randomness. And for example, when you cast die, when you cast some dice, a pair of dice, let's say, or let's say five, you're playing Yahtzee or something, right? And to you, it looks random. The numbers come, but actually, those dice are all, even if you just roll one, its outcome is determined by the laws of physics. Okay, and if you know all the variables involved, which can include air pressure and breeze, little movements of the air, maybe too subtle for you to even feel, and all kinds of things about all kinds of things about like the surface you were, say you had a cup and you're rolling it out like in dice, where your hand, all kinds of variables. If you knew all those, you could predict the outcome. So really, it's not random; it's just unpredictable to you. So it appears random. But not so with the Lord. Not so with our God. He not only knows all those factors and can predict the outcome. He can control the outcome, which is why you see lots cast so often in the Bible to get the Lord's decision on something. Because he's counting them, and of course the last case of that was who's going to replace Judas, with the lot going to Matthias. At the end of the day, we'll talk about a piece of property being a lot, and people saying it's my lot in life. Except no, it came from this idea that it gave the decision of the Lord, because not only can he predict it, he can manipulate it, okay, to come out the way he wants. And here's something else that he understands and he can impart to us. Proverbs 12, verse 20, verse 12, verse 12. The hearing eye and the seeing eye, the Lord has made even both of them. The hearing ear and the seeing eye. First of all, talking about your physical eye and ear. Yes, the Lord made both of them. He understands how they work, and this is why he can cause the blind to see again. He made them. He knows how they work. The deaf to hear again. But there's a spiritual sense as well. Your spiritual ears, your spiritual eyes. Okay, he made those, and you have ears but cannot hear, and eyes that cannot see, unless you go to the God of wisdom and ask for wisdom from God. He's the one that made them, and he's the one that can open your spiritual ears and your spiritual eyes. So you hear from him, and you can see what's really going on. Because the world, by and large, is blind and does not see what's going on. It's groping around like blind men in the dark. In Proverbs 29, verse 13, we read this: the poor and the seedsman meet together. The Lord lightens both their eyes. Okay, so they meet. So the poor may be perhaps they're poor because they were lazy or whatever, but they can also be poor because they were righteous and oppressed. And there's a deceitful man too. But they're both the Lord's going to lighten both their eyes. They're going to see things the way they really are. Perhaps that man that was poor his entire life because he did what was right and would not go along with an evil system, and perhaps enslaved even, because of that, he's going to see his reward. He's going to see his reward for doing what's right. He's going to understand. He was going to understand how wise it was for him to live righteously, even though it brought him oppression in his life, and poverty, because of wicked people. But a deceitful man who perhaps was getting that money from that poor man, he's also gonna see that he's also gonna see and know that he was a fool in the end. He's gonna see his reward, the lake of fire. The Lord's gonna open the eyes to both of them. So the Lord is through his wisdom is really in control of everything. And we need wisdom from God to lighten our eyes so we can see things the way they really are and not be like the world, blind men groping in the dark. And this what some of these things this wisdom is going to do for us. In Proverbs 2, verses 7 through 9, he lays up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keeps the path of judgment and preserves the way of his saints. Then you shall understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. Okay, the he there in this one is the Lord, okay? Notice what he does for the righteous. He lays up sound wisdom for them. He's got all the wisdom you need if you're doing what's right in his eyes. That's what rights means. Right in the eyes of the Lord. To those who walk uprightly, those who just don't know what's right, but do it. He's a buckler. He's a protection for them. And what does he do? He keeps the paths of judgment. Why paths? One leads to eternal life. One leads to eternal death. And he preserves the way of his saints, keeps them on that one that leads to eternal life. So if we seek wisdom from God, we're going to understand righteousness. We're going to understand what's right in his eyes. We're going to understand right judgment. We're going to understand how to treat people right, equity. We're going to understand these things. I've talked about all these things in previous lessons. Yeah, we're going to understand every good path. We're going to be able to understand the path we should be going on, regardless of how things may look to the rest of the world. We're going to see that skinny trail and go on it, not that broad highway that's leading to death and destruction, but that skinny trail that leads to life. And in Proverbs 3, verse 25 through 26, we read this: Be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked when it comes. The Lord shall be your confidence, and keep your foot from being taken. All right, so because we're getting wisdom from God, we don't have to be afraid of sudden fear. What's sudden fear? When something happens to us unexpectedly, like let's say being fired, maybe for doing the right thing, or maybe your whole company goes under because of I was at WorldCom, because the people at the top were doing what was wicked and destroyed the whole company. And people lost their jobs suddenly with no warning. Well, we're not to be afraid of that. And the desolation of the wicked are bringing, like when Hitler brought all that destruction to Germany, and brought the Holocaust and all that. We're not to be afraid of that either when it comes. Why? Because the Lord's going to be our confidence. The Lord will, because if we get wisdom from God, we're going to be confident we know what to do. And remember, we have hope in our death. At worst case, we're still going to be confident. And he's going to keep our foot from being taken off the path that leads to life. And we need wisdom from God to stay on that path. And that will give us the confidence. And in Proverbs 14, 12 through 14, verses 12 through 14, we read the following: There is a way which seems right to man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. Even in laughter, the heart is sorrowful, and the end of that mirth is heaviness. The backslider heart should be filled with his own ways, and a good man should be satisfied for himself. Okay, we have to stay on that path that leads to life, that narrow path, that skinny trail, because there is a way it seems right to man. It looks right, it looks good, it looks like it's going to give you a good outcome, but in the end, it leads to death. And because of that, even though people may be laughing and having a good time for a while, their heart's going to end up with sorrow, full of sorrow. And the end of that, the end of that mirth, that merrymaking, is heaviness. You know, without a doubt, there were moments of great celebration among the Nazis, you know, and Hitler and his crew, you know, and what, you know, for various times. But how did it end for them? In heaviness. Man, I remember the Marshall Plan to Germany would be a third world country today. In fact, East Germany was when the Russians took it over. You know, the difference between East and West was just incredible. Because the heart is sorrowful, because that way that seems right to man, that looks like that human wisdom would tell you to take, is not good. And the backslider in heart is filled with his own ways. And notice the backslider. A backslider is someone who's going forward, then slid backwards. Like a backsliding heifer, the Bible refers to as in the prophets. Okay. If you ever pulled a cow out, try to pull a cow out of a ditch or something with a, maybe get, you know, try to get it out, maybe got in a pond in some miry place and you're trying to get it out. And then get almost all the way out, then slide back and go right and slide backwards and go right back in, meaning be in worse shape. Well, the backslider is somebody who was on that trail, who was moving forward with God, but got off it, got scared, saw things, did that thing, and didn't stay in the instructions. The Lord quit being their confidence, and they were filled their own ways, and it also can bring you death. And we've talked about this many times. It's how you end that matters. He that endures to the end is saved. So don't be backsliding. Keep your confidence in the Lord, and you get that confidence going wisdom. But those who do get that wisdom from God are going to be satisfied from themselves. They're going to know everything's okay. In the end, even if they die in hope. They know that death is not the end. For them, the day of their death is better than the day of their birth. All their troubles behind them. And there's just glory and reward before them. And they're satisfied because they got wisdom from God. And in Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 8, we read this. Trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It should be health to your navel and marrow to your bones. So what's going to keep us from going that way that seems right to man, but only leads to death, is by trusting the Lord with all our heart and not leaning to our own understanding. We're going to seek wisdom from him, and a lot of it's just from reading his word and understanding it. That will cover 99% of the cases in your life. What's already written in his word. And the Spirit of God will help you with the rest. The Spirit of God will impart you the wisdom from God for those outlying cases. But it comes in trusting the Lord with all your heart. And it may look bad. And this other way may look right, but it's not right. In your ways, you acknowledge him, and he's going to direct your paths. Don't be, this is why David and Daniel and others would get up in the morning and pray for start their day's work. In the middle of their day's work, stop and pray again. Take a break, pray to acknowledge Him and gets guidance from Him. At the end of their day, after their day's work, they would pray and thank Him, and and they could go to sleep, and they could go to sleep soundly and sweetly because their mind went on stuff because they were acknowledging Him, and He directed their paths. Do the same for us, but our part is to not be wise in our own eyes. Don't be thinking we're smarter than God. We already talked about how wise He is. What we need to do is to fear the Lord and depart from evil, and not go along with evil to get along with people. Because the majority of people are on that path that's leading to death and destruction. And not only that, it will benefit our health. It'll be health to our navel and marrow to our bones. Your navel is the core of the center of you. You start looking like a little bean in the baby, for the mother. It still is. And if your navel has an issue, every part you move your body, you feel it because everything goes back to that center. So this will give you health as a benefit of getting wisdom from God. And marrow is where blood's made. Marrow to your bones means you're gonna have strong bones. It's gonna keep you from having broken bones and injuries like that. That's also gonna is also where blood's manufactured, and you're gonna have healthy blood as well. So you're gonna have a healthy body if you get wisdom from God. And that wisdom would include eating what's right and not only your own understandings about that as well. Now, I've said it before, and I will cover it again in the future in a very more detailed way. But you are not saved or not saved based on what you eat. However, that doesn't mean everything's wise to eat. The things God literally calls filth, it's not wise to eat them. Now you can be wise in your own eyes, be like, but that pig was fed corn and and so on and so forth, huh? What does God mean by it can't be clean from pollution, which is what the Greek word translates unclean. The Hebrew word is unclean tamei. The Greek word is akathartos. That's translated from that. It literally means uncleanable from pollution. But if you want health, I advise you to eat what He says is clean, and don't eat what He says is unclean. Again, not for your salvation, it has nothing to do with that, but it will have an effect on your health. Now, in Proverbs 3, verse 11 through 12, we read the following: My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of His correction. For whom the Lord loves, He corrects, even as a father the son in whom He delights. Okay, correction. You gotten off the path, you need a course correction. Because God loves you and don't want you on that path that broad way that's going to lead to destruction, but wants you on that skinny trail that's going to lead to life. He's going to correct your course occasionally. And He'll despise. And when He does, He may have to chastise you. He may be correcting you through other people and through His word. But like we talked about the shepherd before, he has that rod and the staff. Remember that rod, that rod. The shepherd can use those things to fight off predators. They also will use them to get the sheep back on the right path and pull them in. And that rod, he'll beat the sheep if he has to. People sometimes are more to protect them, to keep them out of going somewhere they shouldn't go. And the rod, and that's chastening of a sheep. And it's the same with the Lord. And that chastening According to what David wrote in Psalms, he called, he said his chasing the Lord included the venereal disease he got for what he did with Bathsheba. Why? Well, it was destroying his body, yes, but it was, but like Paul said about the immoral brother, and the brother over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh, for the, bring about the saving of his soul, to bring that brother back to repentance, which he did. We find in 2 Corinthians. So the Lord chastising can even include sickness, and he can take your money away, he can take all kinds of things. But notice he's doing it because he wants you on that trail that's going to lead to life. And particularly if you left it because you decided not to listen to his wisdom. So you go back and seek wisdom from God to get out of the mess you probably put yourself into. And therefore, Solomon advises you to do this in verse 16, verse 3. Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts shall be established. Don't go off trying to do it your way. That's the theme song of hell. I did it my way. Do it his way. Your thoughts are going to be established, and you're not going to be double-minded, going back and forth. And we looked at the power of wisdom. One of the keys was being single-minded. In fact, what's the Bible say? If we're double-minded, we're unstable in all our ways. Our thoughts are not established. But when we're committed to him, our thoughts are established. We aren't going back and forth guessing because we've committed to him. We got wisdom from him. We've heard what he has to say. We know what to do, and we're to be single-minded about it. We're to have that one-track mind. People go, well, they just won't listen to anyone else. Well, if you've heard from God, you shouldn't be listening to anyone else. All they can do is get you off from what he told you, okay? Your thoughts will be established. So commit everything you do to him is what Solomon's advice is. Then you won't need the correction and just stay on that trail all the time. And in Proverbs chapter 9, verses 10 through 12, we read the following. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. For by me your days shall be multiplied, and the years of your life shall be increased. If you be wise, you shall be wise for yourself. But if you scorn, you shall bear it alone. So, remember, the cornerstone of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. We talked many times. We started with our very first lesson in this long series on wisdom, the foundation of wisdom. The foundation of wisdom is the Torah. The Bible tells us so. But the cornerstone is the fear of the Lord. And knowledge of the understanding of the holy is understanding. Knowledge of him. And how we know him by obeying him. Remember what Yeshua said. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity, you never knew me. Or why do you say to me, Lord, Lord? Like no one says to me, Lord, Lord, will be saved, but those who do the will of my Father. There's no knowing God without doing what God says. And the understanding comes from the doing. I know us Americans particularly like to understand first, then do. But often with God, you have to do it first, then the understanding comes. And because you get wisdom from God, your days are going to be multiplied. And your years are going to be increased. Then my wife often get comments that, wow, you're really that old? We don't look as the same age as other people are, our age. Because when we were young, we read the way of the transgressor is hard, and we decided to avoid it. Okay, and it's caused us to live longer. And some people, a lot of people we know, who did not do this, who did not seek wisdom from God. Well, they died. Some of them a long while back. So, if you're wise, you're going to be wise for yourself. if you're as you are going to be you are going to get the benefits of wisdom for yourself. You are going you are going to get that benefit of well done, good and faithful servant. Enter the joy of your Lord today. You're going to get the benefit. You're going to get the benefit. And notice it's for yourself. You cannot get it for someone else. I cannot make wise decisions and save my wife or my children or my parents, my best friend, or even total strangers. I can only do it for myself. But if I scorn that wisdom, if I scorn the fear of the Lord, that also I'm going to bear myself. Where I experience eternal life or eternal death is up to me in what I do with the wisdom that comes from God. Do I seek him for it or do I scorn it? Not only I don't want to hear it, the idea is I mock it. I mock what God has to say. I'm alone for the consequence. You alone are responsible for the consequence of what you do with the wisdom, how you treat the wisdom from God. Where you seek him for it or you mock it. Whatever happens, it's on you. And in Proverbs 12, verses 20 through 22, we read the following. The deceit is in the heart of them that imagine evil, but the counselors of peace is joy. There shall no evil happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. They that deal truly are his delight. Deceit's in the heart of them that imagine evil. Because if they weren't deceived, they wouldn't imagine evil. If they saw things the way they really are, if their eyes were not closed and their ears were not dull of hearing, because they've mocked at the wisdom of God, they wouldn't imagine evil. They'd be departed from evil. They'd be afraid of it. But what's in the heart of the counselor of peace is joy. And they're seeking out joy. They're looking for peace with, first and foremost, peace with God. I'm not going to fight against him. I'm not going to need his correction. I'm not going to leave the trail, so I'm not going to have to be chastised. They're going to experience joy, but also peace with other people as much as impossible. Remember, it takes two to have peace. But we're told, as much as it lies in us, we're to seek peace with other people. And we have peace with other people. We're not going to have trouble from them. There's going to be joy. And nothing evil is going to happen to us, to the just. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to have persecution, because all that live godly in Christ Jesus are going to have persecution. But nothing evil from the Lord is going to happen to us. In particular, because you might think of Job, but especially in the long run, we're talking about in eternity here. Is the big picture, okay? We're gonna have there's pleasures forevermore at his right hand, we're told. But the wicked will be filled with mischief. There's no good thing in hell. There's there's nothing good about standing in front of God, the great white throne judgment, being condemned for every wicked thing you've ever done and being told your name's not in the Lamb's book of life. There's nothing good about being thrown in a lake of fire. And how you get there, remember, all liars go to the lake of fire, we're told in Revelation. I want to say it's verse 21, chapter 21, verse 8. But that's close anyway, so it's not exact. That all liars in the lake of fire, the lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. So we want to be dealing truly. So we're his delight. And that's his wisdom that'll depart from us, is how to do that. I live by a very simple principle. Tell the truth to all people at all times, under all circumstances. Again, you don't have to tell everyone everything you know or thinking. And you shouldn't. That's not wise, the Bible tells us. But you should never lie. Lying lips are an abomination. And if you're relying on the wisdom, if you seek God, if you get wisdom from God, you'll never need to lie. In Proverbs 14, 8 through 9, verses 8 through 9, we read the following. The wisdom of the prudent is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. Fools mock at sin, but among the righteous there is favor. And if wisdom of the fool is to understand his way, God's way, that's what makes you prudent. That's you got wisdom from God, and you understand his way because you've been obeying him. You have that knowledge of him. But what destroys what's their folly? That foolish thing that destroys them is deceit. Now, I haven't looked it up, but the Hebrew word here on 9 is probably, should we say, mockers or scorners. They mock at sin. Oh, no, it's that's primitive and outdated to think that homosexuality is wrong. You're so silly to think that just because people have a Y chromosome, that they're a male and they shouldn't dress like a female. This is the kind of thing we're talking about, mocking at sin. Or that attitude. Often people will try to sound religious. Judge not lest you be judged, saying that's only out of context. You look it up in Luke, that's about with homeless people. Poor people are asking for help, not to be judging them, but to give them the help. It has nothing to do with warning them to turn from sin. As we saw last week, if we do not warn people to turn from sin, we hate them. But they're going to mock at that sin. They're going to mock at. They'll even mock at. They'll even mock at the entire ideal of sin. And they're operating deceit. They're deceiving other people. And they're deceiving themselves. And they got no favor from God. But those who do what's right in God's eyes, there's favor. And that favor comes from that wisdom from God that helps us understand his ways and then actually putting it into action. Now, we continue on here in our last section here in Proverbs 16, verse 1. The preparations of the heart in man and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. If we're not leaning on our understanding and we're doing those things Solomon said that we're advised to do, walking in his ways, living on that path of righteousness, then the Lord's going to prepare in our hearts what we need to do, and he's going to give us the words to speak, as we've seen before. And many examples of that with Esther knowing what to say. In preparations, notice the preparations of the heart. Esther, we look to the wisdom of Esther. Her beauty got her drug into the contest. But it was her wisdom that caused her to be queen and deliver her people. And part of that wisdom was she didn't just go talk to the king. First of all, before she did anything, she fasted and prayed for 3 days. She prepared her heart. That was from the Lord. And then when she went there, she gave an answer and didn't tell the king directly. Remember, all this was from the Lord that answered the tongue. Because when you got the wisdom from God and you spend the time to get it, you'll know what to say and what to do. And in Proverbs 16, verse 9 through 10, we read this. A man's heart devises his way, but the Lord directs his steps. A divine sentence in the lips of the king. His mouth transgresses not in judgment. So a man's heart may have his own plans, but the Lord directs his steps, and that's even true of people who don't even know the Lord. remember the heart of the king's in the hands of the Lord. He can turn it like channels of water in a canal system. He can have it go wherever he wants to go. Okay. So people may have plans, but their plans often don't come to pass. And they end up going where the Lord wanted to go, willingly or otherwise, because he is the God of wisdom and knows what he's doing. And but if the king's seeking, that's even better. He'll direct him. He may have a plan, like Paul planned to go into Asia, and the Holy Spirit forbid him from going. And instead, he went to Macedonia. Lord directed his steps. And the lips of a king is a divine sentence. His mouth and transgression in judgment. And a great example of this is Solomon himself. Melech Shalomo, King Solomon. When the two women came, they're fighting over the baby. And Solomon said, bring a sword, and we'll cut it in half and give each woman half. And I think, well, that's terrible. But he wasn't transgressing. He wasn't breaking God's law in this judgment. Because what was the end result? The baby didn't get cut in half. One woman was like, go ahead. The other woman was like, no, let the other woman have it. Let her live. And Solomon knew which one the real mother was. He did not transgress in judgment. Where do you get that? Where do you get that word, that sentence from? The lips of a divine sentence. Wisdom from God. And we even see it in examples of it. We even see examples of it in ungodly people. Not a king exactly, but the high priest Caiaphas, who was like king he was like king in the temple, if you will. He says, more expedient that one man should die than the whole nation. And then he spoke that not of himself, but the Holy Ghost. He was a wicked man. A divine sentence was in his mouth. He didn't transgress in judgment there. And this is what wisdom from God will do for us. And lastly, we wrap up with this in Proverbs 22, verse 11. A reminder of where we began. He that loves pureness of heart, for the grace of his lips, the king shall be his friend. Loves pureness of heart. What's pureness of heart doing? It's seeking after the good of other people. And Solomon was doing that at the beginning. Joseph, the grace of his lips. He told the king what his dream meant, and then he told him how to solve the problem. Because he didn't want those people starving. And the king became his friend, promoted him to prime minister. And a moment of favor with someone like that is more valuable than a lifetime of labor. Joseph never could have, his own power, worked his way up from prisoner to prime minister. Okay. But he loved pureness of heart, doing things God's way. And because of that, he knew the right words. The right words came out of his mouth. The king was his friend. And we see this over and over again with Daniel, Nehemiah, or Nehemiah. Continually, we see Paul get Shaul, the apostle Paul, get favor with kings and rulers who come into the kingdom. So wisdom from God, again, its ultimate purpose is, yes, we get some great benefits from it, especially staying on that skinny path, that skinny trail that leads to life. But its ultimate purpose is in our seeking wisdom from God. Ultimately, should not be just about us, just looking out for number one, but our pureness of heart, where we're concerned about the well-being of other people, particularly getting them off that broad path that leads to destruction. It's going to lead them to hell. The white throne, the judgment from the white throne for the great throne of God, that white throne of judgment in the lake of fire. So seek wisdom from God so we can help people get on the skinny trail. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.